They say timing is everything in life. You either get the moment or the moment gets you. I learned that lesson the hard way, and what I'm about to tell you is something I never thought I'd have the courage to share publicly, but here we are. My name is Sarah, and I used to work at one of the most prestigious marketing firms in Manhattan. Or at least, that's what people thought. Behind those glass doors and that carefully curated website was a den of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that would make your head spin. Today, I'm going to take you through every single moment of what happened when I was publicly humiliated, fired in front of everyone I worked with, and how I didn't just survive it, I turned the tables on the people who thought they had destroyed me. But before I dive into this story, I need to say something to you. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to All of Revenge Stories, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. The year was 2019, and I had just been promoted to Senior Strategy Director at Hartwell and Associates. It felt like the pinnacle of my career. I'd worked there for 8 years, climbing from an entry-level account coordinator to a position where I was overseeing multi-million-dollar campaigns for Fortune 500 clients. My team loved me. Or so I thought. The office was on the 42nd floor of a gleaming tower in Midtown, all chrome and glass, with views of Central Park that could make your heart ache. I spent more time there than I did at home, truth be told. My life was my work, and my work was my identity. I had a corner office, a 6-figure salary, and the respect of people I genuinely admired. Or again, at least that's what I believed. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were forming. Small things at first. Meetings where I wasn't invited, even though the campaigns being discussed fell directly under my purview. Email chains where my name had been removed from correspondence I had originated. Clients asking me why certain decisions had been made when I'd never been consulted about them. But you know how it is when you're climbing the ladder. You rationalize. You tell yourself these things happen. You assume there must be a logical explanation, that you're probably just being paranoid or overly sensitive. I was wrong about all of that. The person behind it was my boss, Victoria Chen. Victoria had been brought in 2 years before as Vice President of Client Relations. She was brilliant, sharp, articulate, and absolutely ruthless. She had this way of making you feel seen and valued one moment and completely disposable the next. She'd take credit for your ideas in client meetings, then privately tell you that you'd made mistakes she was graciously covering for. She'd praise your work to your face, and then send emails to the executive team questioning your competence. She was playing chess while the rest of us thought we were playing checkers. But I didn't fully understand the game until it was too late. In the spring of that year, Hartwell and Associates was acquired by a larger conglomerate called Meridian Global. It was supposed to be a good thing, more resources, more opportunities, access to a larger client base. What it actually meant was that there was a new power structure forming, and Victoria was positioning herself to be the queen on that board. She had been building alliances with the new executives from Meridian, showing them how she could streamline operations and cut costs. One of the ways she proposed doing that was by restructuring the leadership team. And I was on the list of people she recommended for elimination. I just didn't know it yet. The moment of truth came on a Thursday in early May. It was a beautiful day outside, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive. I was at my desk reviewing a campaign proposal when I got an email from Victoria asking me to come to the conference room. Nothing unusual about that. Except the timing. Except that when I got there, she wasn't alone. There were 3 people I'd never seen before, executives from Meridian. There was also Patricia, our HR director, sitting with a manila folder in front of her. That's when my stomach sank. That's when I knew. Victoria didn't even have the decency to close the door. She just turned to me with this cold smile and said, "Sarah, we need to talk about your future with the company. Effective immediately, your position is being eliminated as part of our restructuring efforts." I stood there, processing what she was saying. Eliminated. That was the word she used like I was a line item on a budget that no longer served a purpose. I asked her why. I asked her to explain. She gave me this corporate speech about synergy and efficiency and how my role was redundant with other positions. It was all bullshit and we both knew it. What she was actually doing was clearing the board of anyone who might threaten her position. I represented institutional memory, client relationships, and strategic thinking. I also represented a threat because I was somebody people respected and she couldn't have that. But here's where it gets worse. Here's where the humiliation came into play. Victoria didn't just fire me quietly. She didn't give me the professional courtesy of meeting with me privately, discussing options, or allowing me to maintain any shred of dignity. Instead, she turned to those executives and said, loud enough for people outside the conference room to hear, "You have 1 hour to clear your desk and leave the building. Security has been instructed to accompany you, and your access cards will be deactivated immediately." 1 hour. That's what she gave me to pack up 8 years of my life. 8 years of dedication, loyalty, and hard work. 1 hour to gather everything and leave my desk. I could see through the glass walls of that conference room that my colleagues were already looking. Word travels fast in office environments. By the time I walked out of that room, everyone knew. Everyone was watching. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved, like they were grateful it wasn't them. A few looked scared, as if they were wondering if they were next. I remember the sound of my heels on the polished floor as I walked back to my office. I remember my hands shaking as I started pulling things out of my drawers. I remember one of my senior associates, Marcus, asking if I was okay, and me having to tell him that I'd just been let go. I remember seeing the look of panic flash across his face because he was probably worried that my exit meant his own career might be in danger. What Victoria didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that I had already set something in motion months before. You see, I'm not the kind of person who trusts blindly. When things started feeling off, when I noticed the subtle exclusions and the way Victoria was maneuvering, I did what any strategic person would do. I started documenting everything. I kept copies of emails where I had originated ideas that were later attributed to others. I saved presentations where my concepts were presented by different team members to clients. I made notes of meetings where decisions were made that I should have been part of. I even recorded, with the consent of my team members, several conversations where Victoria explicitly told people to credit her for work I had done. Was it completely above board? Maybe not. But I was protecting myself, and I'm not going to apologize for that. During that hour, while I was packing, while security was watching me, while my colleagues tried not to make eye contact, I was also very deliberately putting aside certain items. The external hard drive with copies of the files I mentioned. My personal laptop with encrypted folders. Client contact lists that I had developed over years of relationship building. And here's the most important part. I was gathering documentation of something that Victoria didn't know I knew about. Something that would matter far more than my job. About 6 months prior, I had been reviewing some of our contracts with a major client, one of our biggest, actually a consumer goods company called Pinnacle Products. I noticed something that didn't add up. Invoices were being submitted for work that hadn't been completed. Campaign metrics were being inflated in reports. But more than that, I realized that the invoices were being submitted under a different company name, a shell corporation that had been created specifically for this purpose. Money was being diverted. Millions of dollars, actually. When I first discovered this, I had planned to report it through proper channels. But then I started connecting the dots. I realized that Victoria was the one orchestrating it. She had created the shell company through a friend of hers, a woman named Jennifer Blackwell, who served as the nominal owner. The money was being funneled through various accounts, and based on the timing of the transfers and Victoria's lifestyle changes, the new apartment, the designer clothes, the luxury car, it was clear that she was personally benefiting from this scheme. I had wanted to report it, but I also knew that if I did, Victoria would find out it was me, and she would make my life a living hell. She'd already demonstrated that she was willing to undermine people who threatened her. So I'd kept quiet, kept documenting, and kept my head down. But now I didn't have a job to protect anymore. Now I had nothing to lose. Now I could move. That first night after I was fired, I called a lawyer. His name was Robert Morrison, and he specialized in corporate fraud cases. I laid out everything I knew: the shell company, the diverted funds, the false invoices, the inflated metrics. I showed him copies of the documents I had. I told him about the conversations I had recorded. He looked at me with this serious expression and said, "Sarah, do you understand the magnitude of what you're telling me? This is massive. This could bring down people in that company." I told him I understood. He asked me why I was bringing this to him instead of going to the authorities directly. I told him the truth. I wanted to protect myself. I wanted to make sure that when this came out, I wasn't the person who looked like I was just a disgruntled employee trying to take revenge on the company that had fired me. I wanted an independent third party to validate what I was saying. I wanted airtight legal protection. Robert nodded and said he'd help me. He told me to continue gathering whatever documentation I could, to reach out to other employees who might be aware of suspicious activity, and to be very careful about what I said to anyone. Over the next 2 weeks, something interesting happened. With Robert's guidance, I reached out to 3 other people who I knew had noticed something was off. One of them was Marcus, my former associate. Another was Daniel, who worked in accounting. And the third was Lisa, who worked in client services. All 3 of them had noticed irregularities. Marcus had seen inconsistencies in campaign deliverables versus what was being billed to clients. Daniel had flagged unusual transfer patterns in the accounting system. Lisa had fielded complaints from client contacts about services they'd paid for but never received. When I explained the full picture to them, their eyes went wide. They all agreed to work with me and Robert to document everything thoroughly. This was the beginning of something bigger than any of us had anticipated. What had started as my personal humiliation and career crisis was becoming a full-scale investigation into corporate fraud. About 3 weeks after I was fired, Robert filed a formal complaint with the SEC. He also notified Hartwell and Associates Board of Directors with a detailed report of the fraudulent activities. He didn't mention my name directly. The complaint came from his firm on behalf of anonymous whistleblowers, but he made it clear that there was substantial evidence of misappropriation of client funds and falsification of billing records. The response was immediate and explosive. The board launched an internal investigation. They brought in an outside forensic accounting firm. They froze several accounts. And within 2 days, Victoria was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Within 2 weeks, she was fired. But it didn't stop there. As the investigation deepened, the scope expanded. It turned out that Victoria wasn't working alone. Jennifer Blackwell, the woman who was nominally the owner of the shell company, was cooperating with investigators and had revealed that Victoria had actually been blackmailing her. Jennifer had been desperate for money at the time, and Victoria had approached her with what seemed like an easy opportunity to make cash. But once Jennifer realized what was actually happening, that she was essentially money laundering stolen client funds, she had wanted out. Victoria had threatened to expose personal information about Jennifer if she didn't continue cooperating. Jennifer had been a victim in this too. The fraud ultimately totaled just over $8 million. Multiple client accounts were affected. Several executives above Victoria, who had suspiciously not asked too many questions about the revenue streams, were also implicated in the cover-up. By the time the investigation was complete, 4 people had been terminated, 3 were facing criminal charges, and Hartwell and Associates was forced to make restitution to all affected clients. The company also faced significant regulatory fines and had to overhaul their entire compliance and audit structure. I was approached by the board directly and offered my old job back, plus a substantial settlement for the wrongful termination and emotional distress I had suffered. My colleagues called me asking for forgiveness, asking how I could have known, asking why I hadn't told anyone. Some of them had been afraid for their own positions and had believed Victoria's narrative that I was incompetent. Others had simply been too self-interested to notice what was happening around them. I didn't accept the job offer. What happened to me, being publicly humiliated, being fired in front of everyone, had broken something in me. I no longer trusted that company. I no longer trusted people I thought I knew. I realized that I had been living my entire life for a job, for a corporation, for people who viewed me as disposable the moment I stopped serving their purposes. Instead of going back, I used the settlement money to do something different. I started consulting independently, helping smaller companies build their marketing strategies and internal compliance systems. I worked with several nonprofits on their campaigns pro bono. And I started creating content about corporate culture, the dangers of unchecked management, and the importance of speaking up. This channel, Olive Revenge Stories, actually grew out of that. I began sharing stories of workplace injustice, corporate malfeasance, and the people who had the courage to stand up and fight back. Your story matters. My story mattered. All of our stories matter because they're not just about individual drama. They're about systemic issues that need to be exposed and changed. They're about people in positions of power abusing that power and the importance of documentation, legal support, and solidarity in fighting back. If you're wondering what happened to Victoria after all of this, the answer is she faced both criminal and civil consequences. She served 18 months in federal prison on fraud charges. She was ordered to pay restitution. And her name became synonymous with corporate fraud in certain legal circles. When she got out, no one in our industry would hire her. She eventually moved out of state, and I honestly don't know what she's doing now. I don't really care either. What I care about is that she can't hurt people anymore. That Jennifer Blackwell is working with a therapist and has found her footing again. That Marcus, Daniel, and Lisa all got promotions and are thriving in their careers. That the clients who were defrauded got their money back. That compliance procedures have been improved to prevent this from happening to someone else. That's what revenge really looks like. It's not about personal satisfaction or vindication, though I won't lie and say those things weren't part of it. It's about accountability. It's about making sure that the system works. It's about protecting people who come after you. It's about truth mattering more than comfort. When I was packed up and walked out of that office with security watching, humiliated in front of everyone I'd worked with, I could have crumbled. I could have accepted the narrative that I was a failure, that I deserved to be let go, that my career was over. But instead, I chose to believe in myself. I chose to gather the evidence. I chose to reach out for help. I chose to take action. And I chose to tell my story. So here's what I want to say to you, especially if you've experienced something similar. If you've been wronged by someone in power. If you've been humiliated or fired or treated unfairly. If you're in a situation where you're questioning whether you should speak up, do it. Document everything. Find a lawyer. Find allies. Don't suffer in silence. Don't accept the narrative that powerful people try to impose on your life. Your story deserves to be heard. You deserve justice. And you deserve to know that you're not alone. This is why Olive Revenge Stories exists. This is why I'm sharing this with you. Because I know there are thousands of people out there right now dealing with similar situations, and they need to know that there's a path forward. They need to hear from someone who's been through it and came out the other side. They need to know that speaking up can actually work. They need community and support and evidence that the system, while imperfect, can still deliver consequences for bad actors. That's what I'm here to provide. That's what we're here to provide together. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Join us at Olive Revenge Stories. Watch these stories of corporate injustice and personal triumph. Comment with your own experiences. Share with people you know who need to hear that they're not crazy for questioning authority or for wanting accountability. Help me prove to my mother and to everyone else who doubted me that stories like this matter. That voices like yours and mine deserve to be amplified. The day I was forced to gather everything and leave my desk was supposed to be the worst day of my career. It turned out to be the day that changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone affected by Victoria's crimes. It turned out to be the day that taught me that speaking up isn't about revenge. It's about justice. It's about truth. It's about refusing to let powerful people write the narrative of your life. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for being here with me on this journey. And thank you for subscribing to Olive Revenge Stories. Let's keep telling these stories that were never meant to stay silent. Let's keep breathing life into voices that deserve to be heard. Because your story matters. You matter. And together, we can hold people accountable for their actions.